Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the TF Podcast, where we talk about technology, finance, and that usually revolves around Bitcoin, crypto, and blockchain. Make sure that you are subscribed to our channels and you are subscribed to the YouTube. And with that, I'm really excited to welcome my next guest, Cory Klippsten. He's with Swan Bitcoin. And when we hear that in the name, I have something to think that it has been pretty interesting over these last couple days. But I'm really excited. We were talking, you reached out to me on LinkedIn, and I was like, hey, I actually am very familiar with Swan. I'd love to have you on the show. So let's get right at it. If you could introduce yourself, I'd appreciate that.
Nice. Well, thanks, Jonathan. It was great to discover you in the podcast, and haven't been doing a lot of LinkedIn because Bitcoin just kind of lives on Twitter.
Yeah.
But I think it's important, now that we launched about a month ago, and trying to spend a little time on Reddit. Our CTO is spending a lot of time on TikTok, which is hilarious because he's like 40 with 2 kids, and he's just becoming this TikTok star. And yeah, I'm trying to get back on LinkedIn a little bit more. So yeah,
well,
it's good.
That is funny that you said that too, right? Because you're right in that the difference between LinkedIn and Twitter, and the way I don't know, I guess my messaging on LinkedIn versus Twitter is always, slightly different. I might be a little bit more brash or straight to the point on Twitter, where I might be more, I don't know, softer, I guess, on LinkedIn. But my post actually was about Bitcoin, right? Like on that post in particular, I think I said, I think it was something like, hey, things you need to know. Bitcoin went up this much since the other day, and like the halving's coming, and like you just need to pay attention. So
yeah. It is funny. I did some Bitcoin posts last year on LinkedIn, like 3 or 4 over the course of a month. I was always doing just videos, just kind of talking about Bitcoin and letting people know what's up. And I mean, they just absolutely blow away anything else that I used to post about venture capital or startups or anything like that. So, there's a lot of interest out there, and the algorithm picks it up, and the Bitcoin stuff does well on LinkedIn.
yeah.
But the quality of engagement is just so low. So it's like you're only giving value on LinkedIn versus on Twitter, like you're giving and receiving.
Yeah. Although it's been pretty interesting because that post generated for me maybe like 6 or 7 people that reached out to me independently about that. They're like, hey, I saw your link about or your post about Bitcoin. What is this halving thing? Like, why would they do that? This guy, he was like, why would they do that? I was like, I know, crazy, right? It was designed that way from the beginning. He's like, what? And then
That's awesome.
we were talking about supply, and his mind was blown, but in a good way, right? So I was like, and I was like, hey, I told him, I go, look, grab $100 because I know you have it, and just buy some Bitcoin and just watch it go up and down a little bit over the next couple of days.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you'll start wanting to investigate it a little bit more. And he's like, all right, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
the best investment you can make in Bitcoin is your education. The second best money is the little bit of money that you put in to force yourself to learn about it.
Totally. Well, and it's interesting too, right? Because there's, I said this the other day. For me, I've always thought of Bitcoin as priced in dollars, and sure, it is priced in dollars, of course. But I had to sell a little bit of Bitcoin, and I felt the sell in the Bitcoin. I was like, oh, I sold, this percentage of the Bitcoin, instead of normally the way my mind would think in the past was like, oh, I sold this many dollar volume, right? And so for me, that was a really interesting moment to be like, oh, wow, like I've never felt that way before. Like, okay, like, yeah, and it's not like that my opinion of Bitcoin had changed before I thought that or not. It's just that, like, I don't know, it's just a kind of a wake up epiphany for me.
You spend a little bit of time hodling, as they say, holding on to some Bitcoin, and your number, at least to 2 or 3 decimal points becomes ingrained in your mind.
Yeah. I think that's what it was, right?
Yeah.
It's like I hadn't done that. I hadn't sold it. And then I finally do, and I'm like, fuck, why did I do that?
I could say it's some kind of like, cool mystical type thing, but probably it's just, checking Delta or Blockfolio app a lot and always seeing your number there.
Right.
And not wanting to see that number go down, always wanting to see it go up.
Totally. So Cory, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you've actually, let's start before you're a Seattle person, just like me. I'm in Seattle.
Yeah.
Grew up in the area.
We found out not too far away from each other, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I grew up in Seattle and went to Shorewood High up on the north side. Parents still live in Edmonds, and brother's still running around. Go hit up the Giddy Up. They're still serving in the times of the Rona or the whatever down in Fremont. So hit that up. And yeah, really enjoy Seattle. I still, if you go to swanbitcoin.com, you'll notice the colors might look a little bit familiar. It's because the starting palette was the Seahawks colors.
That's awesome.
So
That's
this
awesome.
this swan behind me here is a very dark, rich navy blue that
I
should
love
look
it.
kind of familiar.
Yeah.
Our designer may have tweaked things just a little bit, but yeah, I basically started with the gray and the blue and everything. I was
You just,
like they probably studied color palettes and what looks good together like better than we can with a team of 4.
yeah.
So why don't we just do that?
Nice. Nice. Um, so how did you kind of get involved with, finance, and, I know you've been
Yeah,
doing stuff with like venture capital and things like
sure.
that throughout. I'd love just start there. And then where did the evolution to Bitcoin come in?
Yeah, so just real quick run through. Started my career with Microsoft out in New York after interning in Seattle and Redmond, and basically out in New York, I just started to see all the money flowing around and was kind of curious like how that works because I was, Seattle's very like arts and science, and I went to journalism for undergrad, and I didn't hear the term investment banker till the year 2000 or something like that. So I got it in my head that I'd eventually go to business school and
Yeah.
learn this whole business thing. I got a job with Morgan Stanley, which was supposed to be a 2 or 3 year lead in to really understand finance and economics, like heading into business school. Happened to work in Tower 2 on 9/11.
Oh,
Building fell
wow.
down. Totally fine. My whole department was fine. But the long story short was I decided to go to business school like as soon as possible because I just didn't want to like work there anymore or get another job.
Yeah.
So I
Scary.
went to, I had just always been in, like I went through the dot-com bubble on the tech side of things. So I was trying to find like, okay, what's the most solid background that you could get? University of Chicago was just known for being really hardcore, stats and finance and econ. And I went to University of Chicago, did an MBA in finance and entrepreneurship there. And then went to work for McKinsey and Company, the management consulting firm out in New York
Yeah.
afterward. And so kind of my goal there was like, okay, if the dot-com thing was, not real, let's go try to find like what the real economy is all about. So management consulting and then private equity. Lo and behold, private equity and all these old line companies start blowing up in '08. And I'm like, wait a minute. So the real economy was BS too? That's messed up.
That's
So
that's a
yeah,
crazy epiphany, right? Like
yeah.
you're like, oh, okay, I understand why this, this tech thing might be fake, but yeah, let's go to the historical stuff. And they're like, well, wait a second, this is built on a dream as well.
Yeah. So that was pretty wild. And then, so the idea that I had at the time was, basically if you can work at a small company where you control your fate a lot more, at least you wouldn't be kind of at the whims of the market or whatever. And so I just had a lot of friends that had stuck it out from the dot-com boom, and stuck with it through the down and then back in the up, and they were doing really well in tech and selling companies and stuff. So I kind of felt like I could get into startups.
Hmm.
I took a job with Google for a couple of years, kind of like internet business school for 11 to 13, just to kind of get the lay of the land. I networked like a beast, probably met 1,500 VCs and founders over a couple of years. People are pretty quick to respond to an email from a Google address.
Right.
So that helped a lot. And then moved out to California, early 13 with Google, and left that summer to work in startups. And I've basically done angel investing, advising of CEOs on strategy and fundraising. I've been raising money for things since like 2004. And then if I saw something that looked really cool, I would operate and jump in on the team. So I was part of an ad tech founding team for a couple of years, like 13 to 15. And then, yeah, I got hit upside the head by Bitcoin 3 years ago, May of 17, after some fits and starts. Like somebody gave me some Bitcoin in January of 14, and it just didn't take. I didn't do anything with it and lost the key.
Yeah.
But it took because the price mania and everybody like quitting jobs to go work at ICOs or whatever. That's when I started my research, and I bought some Bitcoin that spring and summer of 17, and just started to pay attention. Very similar path to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um, the From there, I would say the transition was fairly quick. It was probably I think I was all crypto by like January of 18. So I started switching over my professional activities. Um, I came at it from the view of a lot of, startup and VC types, thinking like, hey, if there's this Bitcoin thing, that might be my space. Maybe Facebook is around the corner.
Yeah.
And so it took me about a year to do the horseshoe, as they say, the altcoin horseshoe, if you're being generous, where you go looking for that Facebook and trying to see like what else might be out there. And then you come back around to Bitcoin in many cases. That was certainly the case for me. So by the time
It's funny. It's funny that you say that, because a lot of, I've definitely talked to a lot of people like that. For me, you know, people know that I'm very bullish on Bitcoin, and like that's like kind of my chosen. What I always say is, for me, it's Bitcoin, and then the blockchain that doesn't exist yet, and then some other things, because I really am bullish on blockchain as a technology. I just don't think in the hypothetical though, and so I'm not necessarily in like the right now for it, but
yeah,
it's been so clear with Bitcoin. Every single time something has tried to quote unquote knock it down, kill it, be the replacement, it just makes it stronger. It's like
yeah,
it's like that meme of like, I'm getting stronger. Like it's
yeah.
so anyway.
I mean, I'm more bullish on blockchain, if you want to call it that, as an industry than as a technology. Technology's been around
Sure.
about 40 years, and it's just a slow, expensive database that should never really be used for anything other than a new government-free global money.
Yeah.
But when you throw a lot of money and smart people at something, oftentimes good things happen. So, you take Figure, which is doing, digitized super fast HELOCs. They raised money from a bunch of blockchain funds. Take a good idea and sprinkle some blockchain on it. They're
Yeah.
not talking about blockchain. They didn't need a blockchain for it,
Totally.
but they raised at an egregious valuation from a bunch of dumb money blockchain funds, and they're killing it. They're like the number 2 or 3 issue of HELOCs in like 2 years of operations.
It's
It's
crazy.
insane,
Yeah.
because they are really smart people attacking an old line business.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's like, kind of to go with what your point is, they're digitizing an old process,
mhm.
right? Like that's been
Yeah. I
super,
mean,
yeah,
blockchain is just IT at this
yeah,
point. It's like, it's a good reason to be able to get a meeting with, the head of innovation at some company, or get people to
yeah,
come to a meeting at the same time and hang out at
sure.
Davos or whatever.
Right. Like if you have to rely on the write function, the writing function for blockchain, like good luck. If it's on the read function, okay, like I can
Mm,
I can kind of understand that. But if you're really focusing on like the writing function, it's like, wait a second, come on now.
yeah.
But yeah, anyways, sorry. So
Yeah. No,
I
so
interrupted. Go
here's the
ahead.
funny twist. So when I reached my view that basically I didn't really care about anything else, and it wasn't even like a moral judgment or anything, at that point I was now sitting in a seat as president and chief investment officer of one of the biggest crypto funds. So
I didn't catch that. Well, I didn't
yeah,
realize that. That's
so
hilarious. Well,
I was running DNA fund for Brock
okay.
Pierce and Scott Walker,
Yep. Yep.
the EOS guys,
Yeah.
and all their other, new ICO ideas, and, new crypto funds and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
What happened?
So
Is DNA Fund still going, by the way?
no, DNA, I don't know when they officially wrapped up, but most of the team went over to Wave Financial, which is Dave Seamer and Ben Tsai. Ben, who I hired at, actually a lot of that team is people I hired at DNA.
Oh yeah.
Interestingly, Dave was actually in my class at University of Chicago.
Oh really?
It's a super small world.
That's cool.
And then the rest of them are at like Adaptive Holdings or something like that. I
Got
don't
it.
know
Got
what
it.
they're doing, but or just spread out and did other
Yeah.
things.
Real quick
And
though. So how did you get into that? Where all of a sudden you're
I mean, I was in LA, so it was like I was super interested in like Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, like whatever this thing was, and there was all
sure.
this like money. It was just like clearly a lot
Yeah.
of heat drawing talented people, super shady people too. I mean, the
Right.
overlap with like cannabis and scam artists and people that had, a lot of dudes that are in their 50s and got divorced and hiding money and going to Puerto Rico and, whatever it is. Like
It's
it was
definitely
all of that weird Wild West stuff.
yeah.
But it was clear that, Bitcoin at least was real.
Yep.
And, I sorted through all of that, drinking from a fire hose and taking pitches from every one of these, ICOs, whether they were like legit, semi-legit, total scams, whatever. Like you kind of saw everything in that seat.
Yep.
And it was, I had the benefit of not having to spend a lot of time making my judgment, because I had all the information and all the conversations that I wanted at my fingertips.
Right.
So I could, in 4 months because I started hanging out around DNA in like November. Within 4 months, I was pretty much dead set that I was going to be working in Bitcoin, nothing else.
Totally. It's yeah, I love it, man. So I actually got in the space right around the same time. So it was early 2017. And like I had kind of like you, I'd paid attention to it and just didn't really pay it as much attention as I wish I would have, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I remember when I was, and even when, Bitcoin was down at 3,000, it was like, oh, are you going to get out of the space now? It's like, no, like like, not at all, not at all. So anyway.
Yeah.
So okay, so that's kind of how you kind of got on that side, and then
Yeah.
where did Swan Bitcoin come up? When did you start thinking through that?
Yeah. So I fully extricated myself from DNA by the end of August. And I had started working on something I was calling then the Bitcoin Ecosystem Fund. Was initially trying to do that under the DNA umbrella, but it really just didn't make sense because they were so known for EOS and
EOS, yeah,
tokens and stuff. So I kind of just hip pocketed that. I went to Istanbul for the whole month of September, and I got back basically just pinging friends and saying like, how could I just I just want to sell Bitcoin. Like all I want to do is just talk about Bitcoin and sell Bitcoin,
yeah,
and like what are the ways that you can do that. And I first started looking at doing a closed-end fund and selling to institutional, essentially like an end run around having to get an ETF approved and just get on some pink sheets and kind of essentially a competitor to Grayscale basically.
yeah,
But when it came time to actually do that, because it looked like we were going to get approved, and I think it eventually did, I realized the only value I was going to add was probably selling the thing, which would mean going and talking to institutions, up and down Wall Street or something, and just how uninteresting that is for me, and just what a horrible fit that would be for my life, enjoying being home in the sun in LA and having young kids, and I
yeah,
just didn't want to do that at all. So I was just back, doing the usual like consulting and angel investing and strategy advising and helping, SaaS and marketplace and, ad tech companies raise funds and stuff like that. But spending all of my time, 40, 50 hours a week on the side, learning about Bitcoin, networking with Bitcoiners, getting to know people, trying to add value, trying to add clients that were actually in the Bitcoin space. Got a couple of them, started to get my kind of sea legs and start to see opportunities. And so yeah, as 2019 started to gather steam, it was April of last year that I had the idea for the first product of the company, which is givebitcoin.io, which is basically the best way to onboard a new coiner. Like,
mm,
so friends, family, somebody at work or whatever, you want to get them into Bitcoin. You already noted that one of the best ways to get somebody to care is to get them to own a little bit.
yeah,
So basically you bundle the gift of a little bit of Bitcoin with a Bitcoin education that we have a book called The Gift of Bitcoin, which is like the perfect introduction to Bitcoin for somebody that hasn't had it before.
yeah,
And they get the book, or they also get an email every month. So the next 12 months, they're going to get a chapter of The Gift of Bitcoin delivered by email. And the trick of it is the Bitcoin that you've given them is escrowed, so they can't touch it. So it's sitting
yeah,
there in a custodial account for them with Prime Trust, which is a big custodian that does all the
right,
custody for Binance and Bittrex and OKX and all these guys. And then after a year, they've at least had a good opportunity to get up to speed on Bitcoin, and then they take possession of their Bitcoin and hopefully make good decisions.
yeah. That's super interesting. I love it. I like the fact that it's held there for a year, for in that context, right? And then they
Yeah,
can always buy more if they want to or
of
whatever,
course.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And so you noted they could buy more. So initially we designed that product with a buy button, and realized, oh wait, people are actually like hitting buy and actually giving Bitcoin to themselves. Like, why is there a market here? Like, shouldn't Coinbase have this locked up?
yeah,
And basically what happened is because all the people involved in our company were hardcore Bitcoiners and were like, famous authors like Safety and the Moose or Matt Odell from Tales from the Crypt or Stefan Livera from Stefan Livera podcast. And, all these people that were like hardcore Bitcoiners were owners of the company.
yeah,
Um, in our we actually had a recurring purchase function as well, and it turned out that our fees on that buy button were way lower than Coinbase and Gemini for a recurring purchase. And so basically probably by like even before we launched, I'd say like by like July, August, September of last year, kind of knew I wanted to strip that out at some point and make it its own product
Mm-hmm.
and just go head to head with Coinbase. And finally made that decision to do that in December. We turned off the buy button inside Give Bitcoin and started designing what became Swan in
So
December.
in Swan, so you only trade Bitcoin. You can't do other currencies.
We don't trade. There's no
Oh,
trading. You can't
just
sell.
got it. Just
Purchase only.
you purchase only, and then
Yeah.
does it have a wallet function in there as well?
No,
Or
no. So you either so first of all, the only thing you can do on Swan is sign up for a recurring purchase plan.
okay,
So
so you put it, and then you have it.
85% of people choose weekly because that's our
Yeah.
most frequent, which makes the most sense. That's the best way to dollar cost average. So let's just say almost everybody is signing up to do a weekly purchase of Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
The average purchase is a little over $100 a week.
Got it.
So people are, basically putting in, $100 a week in the Bitcoin.
And then what they put a wallet address in there to have it go to.
Yeah. So two things. So you can either leave it custody with us for free, which is again with Prime Trust, Fireblocks on the back end, or you can set it up for manual withdrawal, which is you initiate the withdrawal for free, or you can set it up for auto withdrawal, which is every time you have a purchase, it automatically withdraws to your address.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. I love it. So let's go. What is dollar cost averaging for someone that might not be familiar with that term?
Yeah, sure. It just basically means the dollars that you're putting into the investment or the asset or the purchase are the same always. So it's basically saying like, hey, I'm going to buy this dollar amount of an asset every day, every week, every month, every year, regardless of the price of the asset. So basically, if Bitcoin is $5,000 and you're buying $1,000 this month, you're going to get, 0.2 of a Bitcoin. If it's $10,000 next month and you're still putting in that $1,000, you're going to get 0.1 Bitcoin.
Right. Cool.
It basically helps you buy more when the price is low and buy less when the price is high. So
Right.
it ends
And
up
it
being really a smart way to buy.
for sure. And like a tool, it's if you're committed to Bitcoin in the long term as part of your, like why not? And as opposed to trying to figure out the best time to time the market also.
Yeah.
I joke that my investment strategy is to buy high, sell low, but that's what it used to be. But now it's just buy whenever.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. Like, there've been a lot of studies across lots of markets, and basically, unless you really know a lot about the specific thing that you're investing in, 96% of people buy high and sell low, and all
Totally.
the money is made by 4% of people. So what I say is like, okay, so you've discovered this Bitcoin thing or this cryptocurrency thing. Were you a paid, compensated professional trader before you got interested in this? If
Yeah.
the answer is yes, by all means, unleash
For
thy
sure.
skills
For
and
sure.
experience on this and trade. If you
Yeah.
weren't a trader before you got into this, don't be a trader. Like, it's
Yeah.
stupid. Not trying to trade all day in stocks because you just get crushed. Like,
Yeah.
just buy and hold like you do with everything else. We
Right.
very much see this as like, the third bucket alongside your retirement savings, 401k, or your mortgage. And it's, basically for 99% of people, the only way we Americans in particular with our consumption culture and like overextended credit, the only way that we're able to accrue a good bit of value in an asset is if it's a one-time decision and it's done automatically for you.
Yeah.
So as a product, if you want to have the best way to buy Bitcoin for 99% of people, it has to be an automatic pull from the bank account that you don't have to reenact over and over again. Like, you set it and forget it
Right.
and it's always on forever. And then it has to be an automatic purchase of the Bitcoin. So you just don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. That totally makes sense. Yeah, no, I love it, man. That's great. Well, congrats on doing that. I'm excited to see what you guys are able to do with it. And it's the value prop's super clear. So my background's in product management. And what I always say is like, there has to be a case for the use of the product. And we're actually, well, I'll have to talk to you about this offline, but I'm putting together, I don't know, call it a course slash session on productizing Bitcoin. And so it's basically, we're going to be talking with different companies who have done what you're doing. You're productizing Bitcoin overall, as opposed to, other things. So I'd love to just kind of talk about what's been happening in the markets overall. Starting with, call it Black Thursday or whatever people have been saying, right? So,
March 12th.
yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly.
That
So,
was fun.
everything dumps. right? And we go from about 10,000 Bitcoin all the way to 3,800, and then it hovered around 5,000 for a little bit. You know, from your kind of investment background and what you've seen, what are the things that you think caused that overall to drop in that way?
Yeah. So, I mean,
Mind you,
Bitcoin,
the whole market dropped, of course, right? Like the stock
yeah,
markets,
for
everything
sure.
dumped. So
But Bitcoin dumped a lot, and I
yeah,
think, and it snapped back very quickly too. So, it is important to remember that we're hovering around 9,000 today,
exactly.
which is about where we were, you know,
Yeah.
even a few weeks before that, which is great. Um, so basically, Bitcoin is super liquid. Anybody can trade it anywhere, pretty much, at all times. And when you are a fund or a trader and you're getting margin calls because your S&P positions or whatever other position that you have on is getting margin called, you're going to sell, whatever isn't nailed down.
Hmm.
So especially when you got into like aftermarket situations, which that happened late into the night on the night of March 12th. I was in this room as it happened, and it was pretty brutal. I was trying to meet margin calls myself, but uh, and yeah, I think you just had a situation where probably the natural place for it to settle out was probably in the low fives or the high fours or whatever. But
Yeah.
if you've done some reading up on it, there was a situation with the trading engine and the execution algorithms at BitMEX, which is one of the bigger exchanges for leveraged futures, and essentially they just had cascading liquidations with nobody on the bid. So there was just like nobody to pick that up. And the only thing that stopped that from just continuing to go was a very fortuitous outage
Hmm.
in their system.
Totally.
Arthur, the CEO, probably just pulled the plug, is what most people think. And that let it just give it a breather to, basically like snap back up to
Yeah.
5K. And it didn't drop as low on most other exchanges around the world. The low fours was kind of the bottom. But yeah, as you noted, by the morning it was back at 5K, and
Yeah.
just kind of like worked its way back up, and now we're in sort of reasonable territory.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, right? Because there's been so much volatility in the markets, and for the most part, the stock market's been going, steadily up. I think today it dumped a little bit, but I haven't checked in a while. But while the stock market was fluctuating, you know, up and down a couple thousand, Bitcoin was actually just hovering around 6,000, and it kind of went through this like 6,800 to 7,200 for I don't know, call it a couple weeks,
Yeah.
while there was so much fluctuation everywhere else. So I found that super fascinating, right? It's like we talk about how volatile Bitcoin is when in fact it was maintaining its stability much stronger um, than the other. And at that same time, oil dumped, right? And so, you
Listen,
know,
man, it's all noise. It's
yeah,
all noise. Like Bitcoin supposed correlations in the short term, is just trading driven, and
yeah,
it's just, algo driven or whatever. But when you zoom out, there's nothing you can do. Nothing markets can do. There's nothing the Fed can do. There's nothing that, S&P traders can do. There's nothing that, Renaissance deciding that they want to start trading Bitcoin. There's nothing they can do to stop Bitcoin from doing what it's going to do,
yeah.
which is probably just going to increase in price as more people get educated and decide that they want to buy some and hold some.
Right. I mean, do you know this? I always forget what the percentage of people that own Bitcoin right now. It's single digit percentages, isn't it?
It's super low, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, my
It's
my calculation is based on like a meaning, something you might care about, and basically the number is the number of people that own $100 US dollars worth of Bitcoin or more globally is about
mm,
7 million. So
crazy.
it's 0.1%. So go buy $100 of Bitcoin and you're in the 99.9 percentile.
That's crazy. That's so crazy to think about, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So, and yes, it's like the whole stacking sats thing, right? And so, like, it's when you have, like you mentioned, like Fold or some of these companies where you can get, like this kind of like cash back type things and things like that. And there's all
Yeah.
these interesting tools out there. So, we've been climbing up now, and we're about, call it, you know, 10 days to the halving, or no, 11, because it's around the 11th. Have you seen like an uptick with your business and like with people buying, I guess gifting it more right now? Or even outside of that?
Yeah, so I mean, I haven't been in the Give dashboard in a long time. I don't really pay that much attention to it. It's a nice utility, but all our
Yeah,
focus is on Swan, and
got it.
that's where you see all our activity. Um, and again, it would be hard to not be just fooled by randomness because it's growing so fast anyway. Since we
Yeah,
just launched, we launched to the public on March 30th. So it's hard to say. I do think that I do think there's been some increased activity. Our numbers have been fantastic the last few days,
yeah,
but I think that was going to happen anyway.
sure, sure.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be bananas for anybody in the Bitcoin business over the next couple of years.
yeah. What do you think? So, being that you worked at McKinsey and spent some time there, and you've been at Google, big companies, I'd love your thoughts and outlook on what does it take for businesses to really start embracing Bitcoin at every level, right? So, from the level, let's just start the conversation on what do you think it takes for businesses to accept Bitcoin as payment? And sure, there's like certain places that do, but for the most part, it's usually like in a credit card type fashion. So it's more from the merchant processing. So they don't care because they get it in dollars, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but what do you think it takes for companies to start saying like, "Yo, you need to pay me in Bitcoin. I want Bitcoin overall."
I mean, I don't know. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I don't know. I mean, like, for what end?
Well, I guess I
Like,
just mean,
if you're a business who wants to get paid in Bitcoin,
yeah,
like, you only accept Bitcoin. So you get, like, Guns and Bitcoin down in Orange County, like Ragnar, like, just loves earning Bitcoin. He's obsessed with earning Bitcoin. So he
totally.
only accepts Bitcoin. And if you want to pay him in fiat, you gotta, like, go use that fiat to buy some Bitcoin and send it to him.
Right, right.
Like,
Yeah, it's
all
basically
more power to him. But it's a
when
it's
the
a merchant
merch,
choice.
yeah. Yeah, like when the merchant demands it, or when their customers demand, or sorry, their whoever they have to pay demand it, so they need it
But
overall.
that wouldn't matter either. You would still just, probably accept fiat for the most part and just, like, buy Bitcoin if you had to pay somebody in it.
Yeah,
Like, we're so far away from a Bitcoin circular economy.
yeah,
And this is where, some people who really want to push, Bitcoin as a payments technology or whatever, like, that that meme or that goal, was something that got hot in 2013, 2014, 15. And it was a way for a lot of people that got into Bitcoin to, ride out the winter,
hmm,
trying to push these venture-backed payments businesses or whatever. And they got out over their skis and ended up being on the wrong side of history in 2017 with the New York agreement and SegWit 2X and all those things, which is,
mm.
what caused the split to Bcash and all these other things.
Oh, careful!
And
Don't call it Bcash. I'm just kidding.
why?
Have
Yeah,
you ever
I
seen
mean,
that
it
video?
is.
No, I know. Have you seen
Yeah,
that
no,
video?
of course. Yeah, I'm good friends with John, the guy who got flipped off. I talk to
I
him
was
every day.
teasing. Yeah, I'm joking.
Um, he's got a cool company starting now too, by the way. He recently left. John Carvalho is the guy that got flicked off on his podcast by Roger Ver after accidentally calling it Bcash like 16 times. Um, but yeah, so he's actually started a company with Bitfinex and is doing something, sort of in that kind of like fold, bit refill, strike, kind of like lightning. It's basically like a lightning payments type startup.
Got it.
So yeah, where were we? Yeah, I just think that Bitcoin as an asset class and as a money needs to have a much, 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 much higher number of users, people
Yeah,
that own it and actually have some value in it, and a much higher market cap. Both of those things for it to even matter to talk about a Bitcoin circular economy. This is
yeah,
something we'll probably be talking about after the next cycle, not this one, the one after. So
yeah.
to me, it's probably like a 2026, 27 story.
Hmm. That's fair. That's fair.
That doesn't
Uh,
mean that you shouldn't be working on these things. And there are lots of edge cases that are very important to people, especially outside of places like the US. So, Bitcoin payments is super important when your local currency is broken,
right,
right?
right.
So, like, there's huge reasons, important reasons to be working on Lightning and anything other sort of like Bitcoin payment, circular economy related in other countries, but that's not broken here in the US.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you're right. Like on regards to kind of developing nations, or nations under democratic authority, or sorry, dictatorship, authoritative governments and so forth. No, it's interesting. I think it's a little bit sooner than that, but I totally agree with what you're saying there. When it's like it's, yeah, it's about uh really, it's just demand. It's just, frankly, it's just demand. Like when the merchant cares to say like, yeah, I want this in this form. Um,
Yeah.
I see people have been talking about this a little bit too. So there's all these stable coins coming out, and then some banks are, for the most part, aren't. I don't think they're afraid of Bitcoin by any means. I think it's more like they just don't get margin on it. It's not part of the business model, right? You know, kind of in your investment banking and just banking and thought, what are your thoughts overall with banks getting into Bitcoin? Do you think that happens? Is it strictly just, again, a business play? Once they make margin, then they get in.
To be very clear, I was in marketing at Morgan Stanley,
Oh, okay.
selling their crappy white labeled mutual funds to high net worth individuals and stuff like that. So I've never actually been a banker.
Okay. Okay.
Um, it's very important to say that in Bitcoin circles. But no, I mean, my take on it is I think that the wealth management industry very much wants to have Bitcoin available to their clients, and they want to be able to be compensated on helping people come to that decision and helping them to, sort of own that asset in the
Hmm.
same way that they are stocks, bonds, real estate, anything else. So I think that's something that we're focused on actually as a next step. We just added Andrew Edstrom, who's one of the partners at Westcap and the author of Why Buy Bitcoin, also a former Goldman guy,
Hmm.
as our head of institutional. So Andy and I are figuring out how to make Bitcoin available for the clients of RIAs and financial advisors around the country. So that's kind of our next step there. We're also working on launching an IRA just for retail to be able to do tax advantaged purchase and stacking of Bitcoin through the Swan platform into their IRA account. So I think that'll be important. As far as the banks, so far the main activity that most of them involved in is just is trading and then like special opportunities groups or funds inside of them, mostly in mining. So they'll like finance large
Yeah.
mining products or things like
Yeah. Like Fidelity's
that.
doing
But it's
that.
always through some kind of like special side pocket institutional. Fidelity's doing some stuff. Blackstone has some interesting things they've been doing with their TAC Ops fund, stuff like that.
Totally. Totally. Nice. Well, before we wrap up, what are kind of the things that you're excited about that's happening on coming on the horizon, just in the space, just in general? What are you looking forward to?
I mean,
Swan.
I'm just kind of, yeah, I mean, Swan, like I don't know, we're about 6x ahead of pace as far as like how I modeled the month of April, our first full month. So we're doing about 6 times better than what I thought, which is a great start. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, I think I'm just kind of, personally interested to have a front row seat to a bull run that I see the beginning of,
Yeah.
because I wasn't following it in 2016. I caught it, near the beginning of the blow off top, essentially. So, what did it look like
Yeah.
going from like $180 to $3,000? I missed that last time. I caught it from like $3,000 to 20, but the 180 to $3,000, that's a pretty good ramp too.
Totally. Totally. That's crazy.
And then there's something else I'll just mention, which is I also recently started a venture fund called Bitcoiner Ventures, which was dusting off the old plan from the Bitcoin Ecosystem Fund. And so it's called Bitcoiner Ventures. The partners are myself, Stefan Livera, who has the Stefan Livera podcast, which is
Yeah.
very big on like macro and Austrian economics. And probably your
Yeah. It's
listeners
a
probably listen to him too.
it's a great cast. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's fantastic. And then Jan Pritzker, who's the author of Inventing Bitcoin and my co-founder on Swan. So the three of us, and also a guy named Louis Liu, who used to work at Block Tower, but then became a Bitcoin maximalist and didn't want to work at a altcoin fund anymore.
Yeah.
So the four of us look at Bitcoin deals. So far, just started with an AngelList syndicate. So you can go to bitcoinerventures.com, sign up for the AngelList syndicate. We actually just finished funding our first deal, and we met our allocation for that. So there's a lot of Bitcoiners out there around the world that were interested to invest in our first deal, and we'll roll out our second one here in the next month or so.
Nice. And how early, or what's kind of like the makeup for the company that you're looking to make investments in, like stage and so forth?
Seed and A.
Seed and A. Got
Seed
it.
and A, basically the stage where us contributing like 100 to 300 grand is meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice, nice. So yeah, so ideally like some level of product.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And also, like you're talking about, glorified crowdfunding. Yes, it's accredited people, but you're trying to like slap together a lot of like 1 and 5 and 10 and 20K checks to meet a larger number.
yeah,
So, we definitely optimize for brand value as well. So like the founding team of the company that we just are cutting this check into is like really well known and does a lot of, education, just Bitcoin media, and they're kind of out and about, and it's easy for people to want to get on board with that. So kind of at the intersection of like awesome prospects and
totally.
a known company.
Right. And they obviously have to be Bitcoin focused. No,
Yeah,
no
Bitcoin.
alts, no nothing like that.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Bitcoin.
I dig it. I dig it. That's awesome. All right. Last question for you. We're both from Seattle. We're around the same age. The Seattle Supersonics lost to the Denver Nuggets in the first round in
Two,
93, 92.
two or three.
I think it was
Yeah,
93. Yeah.
93 makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So they lost to the Denver Nuggets first round. Dikembe Mutombo is laying on the ground with the ball, smiling ear to ear. If they win that game, would they have become the champions? Because Michael Jordan, the Bulls were not, or Jordan was gone, right? He took his first retirement.
Yeah, which actually makes me realize this was 94.
94.
92 was actually my favorite Sonics team ever. But it was actually 94
94.
that
Okay.
that happened, because 94 and 95 were the Houston championships.
Got
And
it.
then the Bulls
Yeah.
won 96, 97, 98.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, so it was like spring of 1994 was the real heartbreak.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I think they were the best team in the NBA by far, and I think they
Yeah.
would have had no problem. They'd been dominating Houston for years at that point, and it would have been another cakewalk, but they
Yeah.
couldn't get past Dikembe. Just
Dikembe.
choked, man.
Yeah,
It's just brutal.
him and his finger wagging.
His wagging finger.
Yeah, I remember it was a friend's birthday party sleepover. We're all watching it, and we're like, we forgot, because I don't know, we just forgot that there wasn't a game 6 and 7, and we're like, what?
How can this
couple,
be over?
yeah, a couple of us crying and stuff. Anyways, that was
Oh,
crazy.
brutal.
It's so bad.
That reminds me of my Super Bowl party at my own apartment in New York in 2006.
Oh
Seahawks
God,
against the Steelers,
that was
and
brutal.
we had a lot of people over, and may have had a few drinks. I'm not sure, but I think I ended up basically just like throwing silverware against the wall for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, it was bad. They should have won that one. Well, Cory, I love if you left our listeners with a question. It's one thing we like to do is, what's a question that you want to ask our listeners that they can kind of think about as they go about their day?
That's a good question. Okay. So let's say that Bitcoin does what, a few 100,000 of the smartest people in the world think it's going to do. And you're looking back on listening to this podcast, in May of 2020, and it's now like 2025, and you look back on this, are you going to be comfortable with the decision that you've made? Because it is a decision whether to get involved or not get involved.
Mm-hmm.
And by get involved, that means just, starting to listen to Tales from the Crypt or Stefan Levere, or checking out Swan Bitcoin and seeing what we offer, and checking out our education section, or whatever it is. Are you going to be comfortable not having taken that step, and and at least checking it out and making a more informed decision for yourself?
I like that. I think that's a great reflection question for people today. Yeah, the actions that you take today. People say stuff like, "Oh, I could have bought Microsoft stock at this, or I could have bought Facebook stock at that," and it's like, you know, there's definitely something there. So, anyways, well, Cory, thank you so much. I'm glad we had a chance to meet, reminisce on Seattle, and talk Bitcoin. I mean, like that's my kind of day. So
Yeah.
we'll have to do this again
Yeah, it
sometime.
was great. You ever talk to Matt Case at KJR? He's
I
up in
do.
Seattle.
I
Yeah, we,
do.
we
Yeah.
chat a bit as well.
Yeah.
Seems like a good dude.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. Yeah, we've done a couple of fun things together. So good.
Nice. Nice. All right. Well,
Um,
thanks for having me on, Jonathan. I really appreciate it.
you're very welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yep.
Everybody, thank you for listening to another episode of the TF Podcast. Please make sure that you are subscribed on your favorite podcast, as well as on YouTube and Twitter. You can find me at JG Product, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.